Okay, well, do you want to introduce yourself then?
My name is Paolo Salvagione, and I'm an artist that works in a couple of different areas. And I think today we're here to talk a little bit about the piece I did for the Center for the Book, I believe, as well as maybe some other things in my practice. Do you
Uh,
want to introduce yourself?
oh, sure. So my name is Cinthia Marisol Lozano. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a first generation. I am a graduate student at Mills College in the Book Arts program. This is my second year.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And so you were saying a little bit about, I think the first question had to do with the ephemeral, or maybe that was the second question.
That was the second question, yeah.
Okay.
I mostly I like the idea of going back in in reflection of um, when you were like a younger. So I put, is there a moment in your childhood where you felt guided to pursue a career in fine arts?
Um, I think just my father was, or my grandfather was an ornamental wood carver. My mother was a printmaker. My grandmother was an architect and designer. So I think just being kind of around that energy, it just felt natural. And then as I got older, I looked at kind of the different roles one could play as they got older. And it seemed like staying in the domain of art kind of gave me the largest number of options going
Mhm.
forward. Whereas, everyone kind of knows what a dentist does and definitely knows what a lawyer does. So I thought it would be neat to kind of move into a place where I could be many things and still, show up at an event and be identifiable in some way.
Okay. So then does that mean that, I mean, I guess like, well, in observing my nieces and nephews and children that are around me, we do kind of like tend to like mimic the adults that are around us. So did
Mhm.
you find yourself in those moments at times and then seeing that that influenced you?
Oh, totally. I mean, watching, going to workshops and, seeing all the tools my grandfather had, or, looking at the press, and my mother did shin collé, and looking at some of the results of that and the colors and the process, were just kind of things that I enjoyed, and as a kid, you get the scraps and you get to draw on them and they get put up on the walls. And, so you kind of that collection of artifacts, are in there as part of the story. Um, I did the kind of the classic thing and rebelled against what my parents did when I was young, and I was determined to become a professor of philosophy, and that didn't go very well. So it was, an attempt at least to
Okay.
break away from the art world.
I mean, when you're in it, it's in your blood. It's kind of like, how do you break away from something like that?
True. It's true. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just move on to then the second question. I wrote, what inspires your interest in the ephemeral?
Yeah, that's probably not an easy question to answer. I guess, a short period of time. I think there's so many things, like, I don't know. When I did the piece based on scent, the idea was to get at memory, and smells are often very ephemeral, as far as like the time they last. The smell of a lover, the smell of your grandmother, the smell of whatever, your
Mhm.
garden during a season. And I was most interested in um, the memories that are the hardest to get to. They're not the ones that you tell over and over again as you kind of describe who you are as a person, but the ones that kind of live inside of you, and often they don't have words around them. And so they can be triggered by, the smell of something, or the sound, or for me particularly, like a location, like in one of the towns, like the town I went to high school in, there's like a street corner, and I can remember a vent standing on that street corner that I have no other access to. And so I thought about ephemera. I mean, it's kind of odd because it's that moment, it's past, but yet it's etched in your mind and you carry it with you. And so this kind of idea of like, where's the end of ephemera and the beginning of a long memory, and how do you connect, or how do you disconnect, or, and I was particularly interested in, I think, one of your statements about combining it with ritual, because I think of ritual as practice. You practice for a long time in order to be, part of a ritual or to show up in a ritual, especially the ones that are kind of historical. So I was, thinking about my approach to ephemera, and then thinking about, you mentioned how ritual is tied in when you think about it, or at least that's what I inferred from that statement. Could you
Mhm.
speak a little bit about how that how that either is similar to or adjacent to, or
Well, I feel like it's both similar and adjacent. In particular, like the idea or how you talk about memory and like the fragrance and then the ephemeral. So for me, when I'm thinking about memory, when I'm thinking about ritual or something that's ephemeral, I mean, for me, ritual doesn't like I understand where you're with your approach to defining it as something like that's repeated or repetition, or something that is practiced. And however, I also see it as something that maybe is not um, as like repetitious, and so or maybe it takes place at a certain moment, or is being offered to a person in a certain moment through the knowledge or skill of another person, and then you participate in that ritual at that moment by not really knowing what's going on except whatever explanation is being given to you by the person. So I'm part of ritual is definitely part of my artistic practice in how I compose the work, and then how then if informed by it through my ancestry, through my own memory, through my dream memory, and then seeing how what does that look like and what does that mean. And I refer to it as ephemeral as well, because at times like the same memories that maybe were more vivid before are not as vivid now, which is why like we write down on our journal like things that we want to remember, or you know uh, all of all those memories, they somehow are kind of like they're retained in our blood, in our DNA, in our spirit in some way. I believe in reincarnation, so I also think that if looking into past lives is important for me, and it comes up to me as well through dream and through ritual. Whether it's something as simple as like how you mentioned a fragrance, like burning a candle, burning incense, or something else like copal or palo santo, other kind of like fragrances, or if you have a fragrance around you, like cedar wood. For me, wood is such a powerful um, like instant when I'm smelling those things, because then that also influences maybe how I'm feeling, or then how I sleep, or my memory. Like when people put diffusers in their room and like want to clean the air in some way, and then that can either be a repetitious ritual, or maybe it's just like a one-time thing.
I remember finding edible paper and non-toxic pens, and at some event, it might have been a New Year's event, I had people write down things and kind of eat them as their it might
Right.
have been, their secrets or their loves or their desires. And it was hilarious to kind of watch people, eat paper in that way. I think it was a rice paper or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
definitely.
see, I think that type of experience is really interesting, and for those that like decide to participate, it has like I'm sure that, I mean, how significant of a memory it could then like embeds on the person.
Mhm.
And it's like you're presenting people with an opportunity um to, I don't know, try something different, like to think outside the box,
Yeah.
and to participate and be involved in an action. And I think that is also important of my work, is that for there to be some kind of action that it's involved,
Mhm.
whether like how you mentioned, like whether it's they're writing and then eating, or if they're engaging with in a sensory installation that you've done, or like those types of things, I think help to create the experience with it more strength, I guess.
And in that, like, where do you balance agency on that? Are the pieces descriptive or are they prescriptive when the audience shows up?
But prescriptive or descriptive?
Descriptive, in other words, prescriptive means I'm writing you um, a medicine, and you have to take it as I described, 3 pills a day, 6 days a week, whatever. That's kind of like a prescription. Whereas a descriptive piece might be, I'm looking for the feeling of, we're moving in the direction of, kind of more, you know, um, something will allow for like aleatoric, like for the surprise, for chance and surprise to show up in those moments. I guess, where do you kind of, you know, how much of an author are you in those moments? Whereas how much do you give up to chance? Is that
Yeah,
a better
yeah,
way?
I totally get that. Um, I think it really depends on how I view the outcome. So,
Uh,
um, is it what is the intention and the purpose of the work to begin
mhm,
with? And if it is for it to be out of my control, out of my hands, and to give the viewers or the participants of agency, then then I make sure that I'm oriented and guiding it in that direction. I'm interested in how in your particular work there's the one for each or one to one
mhm.
piece that it does have require a lot of engagement. So how did you kind of like navigate through um, whether giving the audience agency to interact with the piece or and then versus like giving a more instructive approach to the participant?
Hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting request from the Center for the Book. At the time, I think the person in charge of the edition was looking for people who normally aren't in book arts to come in and create something at the Center for the Book. Um, the studio manager was amazing, and we talked through a bunch of different possibilities. I really liked the idea of, kind of a miniature wonder cabinet, kind of the classic 18th century natural philosophers way of kind of showing there's a wonderful, crazy, eclectic world out there. And I also had been working with memory, been working with smell, been working with touch. So it was just kind of a, you know, one for each. It was the piece and one for each of the known senses. And some were easy. Smell was easy. Um, and then, of course, taste was a challenge until a friend told me about a protein that caused you to taste sour things as they were sweet. And then the sound piece was kind of fun. Like, I didn't want to put an MP3 player in there. So like each one of these, and the audience of this video can go and look at that piece, but each one of I imagine the slip cover would come off and the book would come apart, and you'd pass the kind of the trays or the drawers, as it were, around a table, and each person could kind of look at and smell and feel and touch. So you could have, kind of 5 different collection of people, and there was enough of each one of the things in each one of the trays so that multiple people could view that as well. So I kind of, it was, getting to your idea of outcomes in my mind. I often like to think of like, what is a possible outcome, maybe not all possible outcomes, but it's always good to have your eye on something. And I imagined, after a dinner party, a collector taking it out and kind of spreading the boxes out, having people kind of put on the glasses or taste or smell and kind of talk about, you know, the piece as a whole. And so that was kind of the imagined outcome of that piece. Um, and then there's all the things you don't think about, like the edition is made by volunteers so that you can't get super complicated. So like I had to kind of rein in the desire to make something, truly, kind of absurdly. In fact, I was glad it got reined in, because, sometimes you can get lost in the technical details of something that are kind of lost on anyone but an expert in that field. And so it was kind of fun to navigate through how to produce the actual thing in a way that was, uh, easy to do, especially when you had disparate labor and individuals coming and working on it. So it was super fun. I don't know if that answered your question. I just kind of wandered over in that direction.
Okay, I think it did. So then I'm just going to jump into the next question where I'm asking if you can describe your passion for sensory installation, or what moments or memories in your field bring you feelings of joy or frustration.
How about, how about all three? How about all of them?
Yeah, that's the spectrum. I'm interested in the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. aren't we all? I feel like there's a moment in every work where you are surprised by an interaction that you did not anticipate. And it's always delightful. Like you just like, couldn't imagine X or couldn't imagine Y. Like when I did the swings installation at the Headland Center for the Arts, there was a moment where a gentleman had come in a wheelchair, had convinced two people he didn't know to put him in a swing and push him. And the entire room was silent. And all you could hear was him saying, push harder. And he sounded like he was 8 and he was clearly, in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not expect that. That just really took my breath away, And so things like that always seem to pop up. And I think that's what kind of continues to draw me into it, is that moment when an idea that you've had and you've been working on for however long, and sometimes it can be for quite some time because of resources or timing or scale or whatever, and then you get to present it to the world and see how they respond to it. And I think that those moments are just so delightful. With the scent piece, I remember, just like my niece, who was quite young at the time, came and she smelled the piece, and she said, "You're, something along the lines of this artwork stinks," and everyone in the room just started laughing. She didn't realize a double entendre on that one. And so, that piece brought. That piece was particularly interesting because you'd have people. I hid the what was actually in the vessels, and you had to go to the corner, and I asked nobody to say anything out loud. So, you could smell them, and then you're like, God, I know what that is. And you'd go and you'd flip over the thing and you'd read what it is. And, people would come up and like, you've got my grandmother in that jar. That smells just like something. And so those are the moments that I think are particularly rewarding for me. Did that answer the question? Oh, and the miserable moments. Oh God, yeah, those happen too. And it can be timing. It can be a number of things. I think the most challenging works are the ones that are kinetic and have to be up for a while. I don't know if you've had an installation that's 4, 6, 12 months, but the audience can be pretty tough on things, and just thinking about how do you provide enough backup materials. If you've got a good team of preparators, they'll go out and manage things. And so I would say, the things that are disappointed is just simply the way life happens. Things get broken, and there isn't a replacement, or a piece has to continue on, and it doesn't have all of the things that make it what it is, because something was removed or destroyed or tripped on or whatever. And so those are the sad moments, I think about it.
Well, you talked about like your fragrance and even the kinetic pieces. So how do you approach the work in terms of research, or how do you decide how to move forward with an idea? Like after, like I guess if you can describe a little bit of how the stages work in your, manifestation process.
I do, in my art practice, and had for a while now, I have 3 thirds. One of the thirds is moving work to the point where it can be realized and presented. The other one is purely research. It's ideas, it smells, it's filling up sketchbooks. It's basically making sure I have a well of ideas in the future that I can develop if I need to. And then the final third is helping other artists that I know realize their own work. And of course that feeds back into mine, because I get to see how someone else, a lens into the world through a different viewpoint is always super helpful. And my engineering skills tend to be helpful for other people to help them get their work out there. And so, the obvious answer to the first part of your question is that there's usually a deadline, and you have to stop iterating and start producing. And so that's a very real world thing coming at you. It's like nobody's gonna want to see your piece 2 weeks after the event is closed. So that, and then often things bubble up through the research side of it. I have to say that at least for me, that one of the more rewarding things is the learning something new. And so when I think about uh, my grandmother used to have, or my grandmother had a quote. She said, "You have to drink an ocean and piss a teacup." And so as an artist, you take all of these things in.
Of course. Nice.
And then you have to kind of present it to the public as this kind of, here's what you get from everything that I know. And I'm hoping it'll convey something, you know. And so, and usually I try to layer it when I think about the work. I try to make it very approachable, um, in a way that engages and, but I also want to reward investigation. So I try not to make it so simple that when you move into it, you're like, oh, that's all it is, So as you kind of move into it, you see things. I reward investigation. Um, you know, I've fallen into the trap of making art for artists, and then nobody but another artist gets it, and either A, they can't afford it, or B, they've got something else to do. So you have to be careful when you start doing that.
Okay.
Things like that, I think, are kind of, at least they may not answer your question, but I think they circle it in a nice way.
Is that something that's consistent with the work when you thinking about like who's interacting with it or who you'd want to interact with it?
I mean, I have to say that I present most of my work in the environment where people assume they're coming in to see artwork. I realize like each situation is different. So like, I haven't done like artwork in the streets, except for in situations where, that street was closed off for however many time, and everyone who shows up kind of is assuming that that's what's going to be happening. And so the audience is, at least, and this can be good or bad. I mean, I found that sometimes with really speculative work, it's difficult to present it to an art audience because they quickly write it off as art. Whereas sometimes it's fun to present it to a design audience because they look at it and they say to themselves, well, what's the utility? They're looking at it through a different lens. Like, how does this work? Why did you do it? And so it's fun to think about audience that way, like, and it could be the same person in two different situations. Same person in a gallery versus the same person in a design studio will have a different hat to wear. And so that, the things that I think about as I wiggle my way through something.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of answered the biggest challenge question, so I'm just going to jump to the next one, where is there a project in your artistic career that you are particularly proud of?
Particularly proud of. It's like picking your favorite child. they can't know. I mean, the evasive answer is the next one I'm going to do, right? You're not going to let me get away with that.
I mean, you could answer however way best for you. So
I think Orbit was a particularly fun project because it was very difficult to accomplish, very difficult to permit, very difficult to ensure. There was some things there that I had never faced before. And it's not often you get to buckle someone into a chair and send them out of a second story window. And so that one, I think, kind of, and then of course, I think, and again, the delightful part is that piece, I think, was only supposed to be up for maybe a month. And the director of the Headlands asked me if I could continue it because she wanted her board of, the board of directors to see it, and she wanted her top funders to see it, and so it ended up like inching its way. It ended up being up for like 3 months or something like that, which is wonderful. So things like that, yeah. The scent work has been fun to see kind of go out into the world and hear the different responses. It's gone to, perfumer type places where, presented as art. It's gone to art places. It's been interesting. There are a lot of, I think there's probably a handful of things I'm really proud of that I haven't been able to show yet, which is very interesting to think about. Like there's 2 or 3 pieces that have been waiting for the right location, the right time, that I think hopefully will be quite delightful. So yeah.
So there's pieces then that you make that don't necessarily have that it isn't made in order to meet a deadline. It's just because you wanted to work through a project and then completed it.
Don't you do the same thing?
Yeah.
Don't you have, yeah, I mean, like,
I mean, I have, like you
don't you
said,
have a
that well
bunch of,
is overflowing.
yeah, I was going to say, I was like, that seems like an odd question. um, yeah, I have things that I call orphans, which are things that I probably won't ever show, but they inform the next thing, as it were.
Okay.
And then I have pieces that, I had 2 public works pieces set to go out. I was shortlisted for this year that I'm just super excited about. And of course, current climate changed much of how that's going to happen. And so I'm still jonesing to get them out in the world somewhere. And then, I have, I had 2 shows scheduled for this year, which are both gone now. And so like where to put those 2 bodies of work, or it's one body of work split between 2 different locations, but still, so like things like that are, challenging, but we'll see what happens.
So my next question is it important to have strong intuition in your field? What are some characteristics of value?
Characteristics of value, intuition. I mean, I think I might rework your question. I feel like curiosity is maybe a better, like, I feel like it's important to be curious.
Okay.
Intuition is valuable, but I think curiosity really reveals more than intuition. And so, because sometimes my curiosity will trump my intuition. My intuition will be like, you should not do that. My curiosity will be like, why not? What could possibly go wrong? And present it in a way that's interesting. So while intuition is important for us to navigate the world in general, I think the thing that that you should definitely nurture is your curiosity. Like all of the whys that you asked ever since you were able to say the word why. And if you're lucky, like I was growing up in a household where my parents bothered to explain the whys, as opposed to
Because I said so.
yeah, exactly, because I said so, or go do something else, kid. Then you have a healthy appetite for answers, as opposed to a fear of asking the why. So I would say curiosity would be the attribute that I put out there. That was the first half of the question. Second, something around values. Could you state
What
that?
are some characteristics of value?
Characteristics of value. And is that in like, tell me what you mean by value in this sentence.
Well, I guess it's in relation to intuition. So for you, it's more curiosity. So what are some characteristics of value when it comes to like moving forward or being curious about exploring an idea or a research or something?
Yeah. I think something that, at least when I was a young artist, kind of the either a combination of either fear or shame, depending on the audience, about talking about what you're thinking about with people, regardless of age and socioeconomic group or whatever. Getting over those is really interesting, because as you have conversations about the things you're curious about, or the piece that you're thinking about, or whatever, often at events, having those conversations, especially if you're inquisitive, you're not telling people, but you're asking them, like, so tell me how you use your memory, or what are your, when you think about smell, what are the smells that really command your attention, besides bacon. And so as you move through these things, I think I think you can do a lot with kind of um, turning all of your statements into questions, and kind of running through your peers, your mentors, and collecting different perspectives on something that will inform what you end up doing. And so I would say the value in curiosity is to extend it as far as you can into different ontologies. I mean, if you're lucky and you have a wide range of friends, then you have access to all these different ontologies, and so you can query them about where it lands in their ontology, and that just makes the piece richer. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And then my last question is, do you feel that your work has an impact in the world? Please describe.
Oh God, this is like an essay question. Please describe. You know, my work is, you know, levity, it's connection to self, it's memory, it's somatic. I think that all of those things are useful. I think they are informative. But you know, in the current climate, I think that, you know, people who are looking towards social justice, people who are facing into contemporary issues, should be getting the, you know, center stage. I mean, although those things really need to change. And so while I will continue to do what I do, and show when I can show and where I can show, I think that you know, it's really important for kind of the social justice voice to be heard, probably for the next couple of years, if not further, until things change, I guess is the best way to describe that. And so, yes, it has impact, but probably, is it relevant for this, you know, year, this decade? TBD.